get started. When we last left our heroes, we had just divided the entire land of Israel, Midan ve'ad Beersheba, which we now know means from the extra portion of Dan, which is very north east of Israel, right at the above the Jordan, all the way down to Beersheba, which is the territory of Judah. We divided the land into 9.5 parts on one side, 2.5 parts on the other side, and all the tribes are in their place. Which brings us now to chapter 20 in the book of Yehoshua, which opens with a very rare word, and that is Vaidaber. We who read the Torah as well, we're familiar with this word, Vaidaber Hashem el Yehoshua lemor. It's just like we have that formula for Moshe, Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, and God spoke to Moses saying. Here, it's God speaking to Yehoshua saying. What's unique about this is that there's no other place, virtually no other place where Hashem talks to the prophets in this way. Only Moses is the one who gets this type of speech, daber. Dibur implies something severe, significant, of great import. The rest of the prophets are all speaking in the name, with the word Amar. Hashem is Amar, which is a softer version of speech. So the Gemara in Makos asks, why, in fact, does it use the word dibur here, right at the tail end of the book of Yehoshua? It says because what's about to be introduced is a section of actual Torah. It's not just later stories that happened after the death of Moshe. This is a mitzvah that's described in the Torah. The mitzvah of dividing the cities of refuge across the expanse of Israel and the Transjordan. Dividing the cities of refuge is actually described in the Torah. There's a Parshas Maseh, and again in Shoftim in the book of Devarim. And here we're getting the actual completion of the mitzvah. When Yehoshua is physically setting aside the cities to be cities of refuge. So a word about what these cities are, and then we'll jump into more concepts. The chapter is going to describe the placement of the cities of refuge. There are 6 of them in total, 3 on one side of the Jordan and 3 on the other. And it also describes the function of the cities of refuge. So regarding the function, what does it mean, refuge? Refuge means you're protecting, right? Like when you're playing tag, you take refuge on home base. Nobody could tag you over there. So a city of refuge is something similar to that. If a person committed unintentional murder, and unintentional here has a very specific definition, which the Talmud in Tractate Makos defines. If a person commits unintentional murder, he is now in danger from the Goel Hadam. The next of kin of the one that he killed has the right and possibly even a mitzvah to kill him, to kill the murderer, to take revenge for their relative's death. And the only place that this person is protected is in the city of refuge. So long as he's in that city, v'chai, he runs away to one of these cities, he will live. And we give him everything he needs to sustain himself. However, the moment he steps out, if he intentionally walks out of a city of refuge, his blood is in his own hands, as we say, and the Goel Hadam, the next of kin of the one that he killed, can kill him in return. Okay,
does he have to? Does he have to come up to Yerushalayim for the Chagim?
That's a good question. The answer is no. He is, as far as I know, he's forbidden to leave that city of refuge. Even if the Talmud describes, even if all of Am Yisrael needs this person, if he was the general of the army, like Yoav ben Tzruya, and all of Am Yisrael needed him to guide their armies into war, life and death matters, he stays in the city of refuge. He stays in the city of refuge. And the reason is because the moment he steps out of there, his life is on the line. And you are not obligated to put your life on the line, even for any purpose, right? So even to go up to Yerushalayim, which is a mitzvah d'oraisa, he sits and doesn't risk his life by stepping out of the city. In addition to the risk of stepping out, there's also a mitzvah to stay inside. He has to stay inside. It's called galus. It's called exile. He's exiled from wherever he came from, and he stays in one of these cities of refuge.
But it is because of a murder.
Because of the murder that he committed.
Murder, but not a death.
Not a death, right. We're calling it a murder, but an unintentional murder. So this, the Gemara Huh?
Manslaughter or a killing. It's not a murder. I think would be intentional.
Oh, you're right. You're right. You know, my English is half as good as my Hebrew, which is not so good either. So
The word
perhaps murder is not the
you're
right
looking
word.
for is manslaughter.
Manslaughter. There you go.
In our
Unintentional.
courts, it would be manslaughter.
I have here an art scroll in front of me, and we'll see. They'll be the decider. Kills without premeditation. All right, they just got around it there. All right. Unintentional killing, manslaughter. That's right. So the Gemara has very specific definition of what this is. It's called well, because the Torah refers to him as a rotzeach. A rotzeach we usually translate as murderer, one who commits. I guess now we would call it manslaughter. That's why in my mind I was translating it that way. The Talmud describes this has to be a case where he is not intentional and not close to intentional, nor is it an onus, which would be way out of his control, right? It has to be somewhere in the middle. So for example, if a person is knocking down a wall, right, on his property, he has to knock down a wall. On the other side of this wall, though, is a public thoroughfare. So he knocks down the wall, and lo and behold, it ends up falling on top of a person and killing him. That is not a person who committed unintentional manslaughter. That is so negligent, and it's so close. It's so obvious that this is something you have to be concerned for, that he does not get the protection of the city of refuge, and he's not obligated to go there. On the other hand, if a person is knocking down his wall in a remote area where nobody ever passes through, and he knocks down the wall, and it just happens to be on that day somebody was walking by and he got hit by the stones and died, this is also not considered the unintentional manslaughter that the Torah is talking about in this case, because that's so far-fetched that he shouldn't have even had that on his mind. What we're talking about here in the Gemara's definition, in the example of a wall, is it's an area which during the daytime gets public use, but at night it's usually empty. Once in a while people come by, and he knocks down a wall at night, and it happens to be one of those times when somebody was standing there and he dies. So it's not too negligent, but not too unexpected either. Somewhere right in between, smack in the middle. That person who knocked down the wall and committed manslaughter, he goes to the city of refuge. Yeah. Now the way it works is he first goes to the city of refuge no matter what. Anybody who commits manslaughter goes to the city of refuge. Then he's taken out of there and he goes to court. On his way out to go to court, the Goel Hadam, the next of kin, has no right to kill him. And if he does, it's considered murder. And that's the real English word murder. Yeah, the proper translation of murder. On the way to court, he's not allowed to be killed. He's judged. If he is judged as a Rotzeach B'Shogeg, an unintentional manslaughterer, then he goes back to the city of refuge, and from here and forward, he must remain there. And he's not allowed to step out, and if he steps out, the Goel Hadam, the avenger of the blood, can kill him. If the avenger of blood comes into the city and kills him, that's considered murder. Yeah, as long as he's in the city limits, that's fine. Now, what's the idea here? Why do we want this person going into a city like this? So, as we know from the very beginning of the Torah, sin is closely related to exile. Adam and Eve sinned, they're exiled from the Garden of Eden. Cain sins, he commits murder, he's exiled, he has to wander all of his days. The Tower of Babel is created, they all sin, they're all scattered and exiled from their place. Right? The Jewish people sin, they're exiled from their land. So here too, this is a very profound sin for neglecting to take extra precaution to preserve human life. So he has to go and be exiled from his place. But it's not just to go to a random place of exile. He goes to one of the Arei Miklat, which is designated for who lives there? The Leviim and the Kohanim. This is one of these 6 are amongst the 48 cities that Leviim and Kohanim get scattered around the land of Israel. And these are the cream of the crop. The spiritual leaders of our people are living in these cities. So, and that's precisely why we want him there. Presumably, it's to be influenced by them. He's around them, and he gets a higher value for life. he realizes the lengths they'll go to preserve life and to bring life to the world through their Torah learning and their service in the temple, which brings life to the world. And that's going to influence him to become a more sensitive person. I should have tightened my axe, one more time. I should have checked one more time that nobody was behind the wall. I should have been extra cautious, because human life is so, so precious. And that's what we're trying to embed into him all of his days in the city of refuge. Now, when does he actually leave the city of refuge? So there we have, it's explained here as well, when the Kohen Gadol, in verse 6, when the Kohen Gadol dies. So why, in fact, is it dependent on the death of the Kohen Gadol? He stays there until the death of the Kohen Gadol, right? Which can be the very next day. It could be 60 years. There's no telling. There's no telling how long that's going to be. I imagine one guy sitting in a city of refuge since the time that he was 16 years old. He's been sitting there, and now he's 66, right? He's sitting there for 50 years. And another guy comes in, and on day one, the Kohen Gadol dies. This person spent 50 years, and this person spent 12 hours in the city of refuge. It's almost unfair, right? They both go out scot-free, and they go back to their homes. Some Mefarshim say this is precisely why it's designed this way. Each person's level of accountability and culpability is not seeable by the human eye. We cannot detect and determine who is more responsible and what measure of punishment, what degree of exile should this person get. We can't make all these calculations. So God leaves it in this very variable state. So everybody will end up getting exactly what they deserve. And Hashgacha, divine providence, will make it that the person who needs longer will end up staying longer, and the person who needs shorter will end up getting shorter, precisely because of that. Now, why the Kohen Gadol? If you think about it, it actually leads to a very uncomfortable thing. Everybody's sitting in the city of refuge 3 times a day in their Shemona Esrei, and maybe even more frequently, they're going to be praying for their freedom, which means praying for the demise of the Kohen Gadol. Yeah. So at the Kohen Gadol, as he's sitting there, in the temple or standing in the temple, you can rest assured that in 48 cities scattered across Israel, it's the 6 cities plus the 42, there are many individuals praying for his demise because it's for their own good. Very uncomfortable. The Talmud says for this reason, the mother of the Kohen Gadol, she would basically arrange a catering business to give food and drink and sustenance to the people living in the cities of refuge. They should say, "Oh, what a nice lady," and her and her son should be healthy. It's so pleasant being here thanks to that lady that I'd prefer her son stay alive. The mothers were desperate to prevent the prayers of these manslaughterers from actually killing the Kohen Gadol. You see here the efficacy of prayer, first of all. There's the Kohen Gadol, the spiritual leader of the nation, one of the holiest men. And then there's this guy who committed manslaughter because he was not careful tightening his axe, or however he ended up doing it. And that guy's prayer, this person, this thug sitting in some sort of jail, his prayer is going to be so efficacious that he could kill the Kohen Gadol. It's unbelievable just to consider and contemplate the power of tefillah. We should not take that lightly. Now the Gemara or the Midrash cites reasons why the Kohen Gadol and the person who committed this act of murder, this manslaughter, why they cannot coexist in one area. It's one person says, Rabbi Meir, I believe, the Kohen Gadol brings life to the world through his service in the temple and atoning for the sins of the Jewish people. That extends the life of the Jews. So it'd be inappropriate for a person who extends life to be in the same domain, in the same realm as this person who just shortened the life. So you keep them separate, and when one dies, then the other can come back. Alternatively, the Kohen Gadol brings the divine presence down onto the land of Israel, whereas this person spilled blood, which causes the divine presence to leave. So that is 2 opposing forces. They cannot coexist. And when the Kohen Gadol dies, then he can come out. But until then, so long as the Kohen Gadol is around, bringing the divine presence down, then this spiller of blood cannot be in the land. So we have, and more pointed, here there is a bit of blame on the Kohen Gadol as well. The Gemara says that the Kohen Gadol is at fault for this accident occurring. The Kohen Gadol, as a spiritual leader, was responsible to be praying and begging Hashem that no harm should befall the people in his country. No harm should befall the nation of Israel. And if such a terrible accident can occur, that someone's knocking down a wall and somebody happens to be passing by and they get killed, that's a bit of the fault of the Kohen Gadol. And therefore we're going to have this guy sitting in refuge praying for the death of the Kohen Gadol. It's a bit of the Kohen Gadol's fault. And therefore it's with his death that this person is atoned and comes free. It shows from here, Rabbi Robi proves that anytime a person has responsibility for others, his family, or people who he influences, is in charge of, you have an obligation to pray for them and plead that nothing bad should befall them. The Gemara relates, I think it was Rabbi Yehoshua, he usually got visits from Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah, that would come and learn Torah with him and visit him, which is only for very holy people. Yes, but once Eliyahu didn't come to him for 3 days. And when he finally saw him again, he said, "What happened?" He said, "Somebody was eaten by a lion a few miles down the road. This is your fault, Yehoshua. Now, how could it be? You are the spiritual leader of this region, and somebody was eaten by a lion. How could you do this? You should have been praying and pleading and making sure that no evil should befall." Yes, so we blame the leader, meaning to say they should be praying to Hashem and instilling a sense of importance for life, and if something bad happens, it's a bit of their fault, right? So we have a responsibility as leaders in our own right to be praying for the well-being of the people around us. Very important lessons here. There is something that we learn from Yehoshua, which is actually not in the Torah, which is one of the reasons it says Vaydaber, as we said. Vaydaber is usually language reserved for Torah, and this is prophets. And that is in verse...
Just to get back to your example with the lion,
Yeah, please.
what about the other 5 people that the lion did not eat?
Yeah. We demand perfection. Zero.
You just can't prove a negative.
Yes, exactly. When something bad happened, that doesn't mean that nothing bad will ever happen, as long as someone's praying for it. But there's a bit of blame to be put on him. In verse number 4 here, we have something that is not familiar to us from the Torah. It appears for the first time in the book of Yehoshua. Presumably, what's happening is Yehoshua is revealing or putting in writing what he learned orally from Moshe Rabbeinu. He's not introducing new Torah. Only Moshe could bring new laws into the world. Yehoshua presumably is just saying over part of the oral Torah, which until now was oral, now it's becoming part of the prophets. It says as follows. He shall flee to one of these cities, stand at the entrance to the city gate, and speak his words to the elders of that city. And then they will give him a place and he will sit among them. He will live among them. Okay, so the unintentional killer, he runs to the city and he has to have a conversation. He has to plead his case in front of the Zikanim, the elders of the city, which means the pious and the wise people of that city. And they have to say, okay, you're welcome, join us. The Rambam learns from here a few halachas. Number 1, if the city has no elders, it is no longer an effective city of refuge. If for some reason all the elders left, or they passed away, or they moved, that city no longer functions as a city of refuge until you get elders back there. Similarly,
I don't understand
that. Since it says here that you have to speak to the elders, it must be that there are elders there. We're learning a law from here that if there are no elders in that city, the rabbis all moved out.
Are people born into families of elders? What do they mean by elder?
No, it means the sages. It means the sages who spent their lives studying and apprenticing the greater rabbis.
Are they Levites or Leviim? Are they?
I assume that not necessarily, but probably yes. Probably yes, because this is the city where they live, where Levites live. But anybody can move there if they wanted, as long as they paid rent. Yeah, so you could have other elders living there. Presumably they were Levites.
Okay, so all the tribes have their own elders, something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody who spends time and devoted his life to growing spiritually and learning Torah, he will become an elder. He
Okay,
spent
what
time.
is the Hebrew word for elder then?
Zakein.
Zaken.
Yeah, which the Torah says it means old person in modern Hebrew, old person, and also in the ancient Hebrew. But it also means Zeh Shekana Chochma. It's a acronym, I guess. This one acquired wisdom. Zeh Shekana. Zakein means he acquired something. What can a person acquire? Just by his old age, wisdom. And that's why, in fact, every person above the age of 70 is assumed to be wise and demanding respect, and therefore we stand when a person above the age of 70 walks into a room or walks within your 4 cubits. So we're learning from your actual new mitzvahs, and in fact, it says, let's say the city got so flooded with unintentional killers. There was just like a horrible accident happening one day after the next, until the majority of the city were killers, and they were all living there in refuge. That city now no longer functions as a city of refuge. No new entries can be accepted, because there's one person, because the way it's presented here is he speaks his words to them. That means he has an issue and he's explaining it to them. But if they both have the same issues, that we're killers and you're a killer, then this is not going to work, and the city of refuge is not functional anymore. So it's a similar idea, and I think the concept behind these halachos, which we're discovering here in the book of Yeshua, is once again that the point of being in the city of refuge is not just to be away from home, but to be influenced by the people in the city of refuge. So if the population is getting skewed and there are too many killers there, it's not going to be potent anymore. You're not going to be influenced. You're just going to be around other people like you. And if there are no elders, you're not going to be influenced anymore. You have to be spending time around wiser people, greater people, people who are more sensitive and able to resensitize you to the sanctity and importance of life. Okay, so that's notable over here that we have new mitzvahs coming out of this section.
So you were saying, what does Maimonides learn?
He learns that, number one, if no elders live in the city, it no longer acts as a city of refuge. And number two, if the city is filled to the brim with killers, it no longer acts as a city of refuge. He learns both of these things from this verse. There has to be what do you call it? It has to be a majority of non-killers to killers, and there has to be elders as well.
Did that, in history, did that ever happen to any of these refuge cities? Do we know?
I don't know. That would be interesting to know. I don't think so. Otherwise, the other commentaries would have been citing that as examples. But as far as I know, not. It's just in halacha, conceptually, this is true. Okay. And I'll just pull up a quick map, which we know and love, to show the distribution of these 6 cities, because this also yields some important things. So this is a very simple map. Where's the share screen? Okay, there are 6 cities, as you can see here. One was Hebron, which, does anybody recall who actually inherited Hebron?
Caleb.
That's right. Very good. It was Caleb. So from here, now that we're saying that it was a city of refuge, we're learning that what Caleb got was not the actual city of Hebron, but the surrounding suburbs of Hebron. The main city of Hebron actually belonged to the Levites. And that's working backwards, that's what comes out. So Caleb lived here, and they actually made the main city of Hebron one of the cities of refuge. Then you had Shechem, that's a famous city historically, the place where the brothers divided, the place where the kingdoms divided, as we'll learn, God willing, in the future. And then we have Kedesh in the north. And then the opposite side of the Jordan, we also have 3 cities: Golan in the north, Ramot Gilad in the center, and Betzer towards the south. Now, these are meant to be equidistant. And from the southern tip of Israel until this city should be equal from Hebron to Shechem. and so on and so forth. Okay, they're meant to be equal. These are 3 and 3. So the Talmud asks, just looking at this map, begs the question. This seems to be very disproportionate. You have 3 on one side. Excuse me. The Talmud asks, yes, it seems to be disproportionate. You have 3 on one side for 2.5 tribes, and 3 on the other side for 9.5 tribes.
Mhm.
That's too much for the Transjordan over here. The Gemara says something interesting, and it says in this area, in Gilad, shchichi barotzchim, murder, and I mean the English word murder now, not like I meant it before. Murder was very common, and it cites verses which refer to the terrible murder happening in Gilad on a regular basis. So since there were so many murderers here, they needed to have extra cities of refuge on the Transjordan, because proportionally they had more per capita. I guess they had as many murderers here, or even more, than on the other side. Okay. Yeah. So we learned from something interesting is we said that a standard murderer will not go into a city of refuge. So then what's it help to have more cities of refuge where there are many murderers? The answer is, if there are many murderers, that means that the general sensitivity and appreciation for life is diminished, and people are much more likely to have fatal accidents. The value of life is diminished, the Maharal explains. If you see murder all around you, then it diminishes your importance for life, and you'll be less likely to double check your axe. You'll be less likely to check around the wall before you knock it over, which is a fascinating thing. Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg once told of his daughter, she was assigned to read a book in high school. It's one of the English classics. I don't remember which one it was. It's written from the perspective of a lady who commits adultery. I don't remember which book that is. He said the name of it.
Scarlet Letter.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, and she said. So he said to her, "What was your reaction?" For a nice Jewish girl, this is a concept which is totally foreign, right? You only read about it in the 10 Commandments, and here you're getting to know this lady throughout the entire book, an adulteress. So she said to him, "Adultery is a terrible thing, obviously, really, really terrible. But now I can kind of understand the other side of the story. She was aware of the fact. She was self-aware that the gravity of the sin was diminished after spending so much time reading the book about it and getting to know the character and struggling with her pain. The gravity of the enormity of the sin, the terribleness of this violation was a little bit diminished in her eyes. The more you're around something, the more you're desensitized. It's a basic concept, right? The more, if you opened up the news today and you show that to somebody, 50 years ago, they'd faint. Like, what on earth? Not even the news, just show them a billboard. They say, what on earth is happening here? It's the slow corrosion of values based on constant exposure. It's the same thing here. Since there are many murderers in Gilad, it corroded the sense of importance for life. Okay. That's our treatment of chapter 20. Chapter 20, again, talks about the laws of running to the city of refuge and the placement of them. In chapter 21, we now, I guess once again, we'll focus on the opening word, Vayigshu, Rashei Avot HaLevi'im. Very appropriate. This week we're reading the Parsha of Vayigash, which always implies an encounter, like a collision of forces. Here we have Vayigshu, Rashei Avot HaLevi'im, the heads of the Levite families, approach Elazar, Cohen, and Joshua, the leaders, and approach the rest of the people of Israel, and they say, okay, it's time to give us our cities, please. Vaikshu, there was a clash. So the Midrash says that there was a bit of a debate happening over here. After all, the land was conquered 7 years prior. And then they spent another 7 years divvying out the land. And then they moved the tabernacle to Shiloh. And now the Leviim decide to come and ask for their land. They said, if you've waited until now, you gave up your rights already. You had your chance. 14 years passed. Sorry, Charlie. Okay, we've already divvied out the land. You have no portion here. Vaikshu Leviim, they came with a strong point and they said, excuse me, please give us our land, because now it's more relevant than ever. Until now, the Mishkan was situated in Gilgal, which we learned last time, which means anybody could basically build an altar in their backyard and bring a sacrifice. The Levites and the Kohanim were not such significant members of society. But now that the Mishkan was in Shiloh, was moved to Shiloh, and you have this central area where everybody has to come to bring their sacrifices. Oh, now the Levim and the Kohanim become very important people. They're going to be the constant agents serving as the ones bringing the sacrifices, the go-betweens between God and the Jewish people, and the Jewish people and God. So now they're saying now our jobs are very important, and now we feel it's right to ask and request for our cities. And indeed, they get 42 different cities, and each tribe had to give them cities. I'll show you on a map the breakdown. But it's divided into four different families. When the chapter 21 describes the distribution of the cities, it describes it in four different families. You have the family of, Levi had three sons, Gershon, Kehat, and Merari. Gershon, Kehat, and Merari. Those are the three families of the Levites. In the family of Kehat, you have a subdivision, which is the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron Kohen, right, grandson of Kehat. The Kohanim got the first cities. We'll see from Yehuda, Shimon, and Binyamin. Then the rest of Kehat were next in line. Then you had Gershon, I believe, and then Merari. Did I get that backwards? Let's just check inside. Yes, so it's Kohanim, the rest of Kehat, Gershon, and then Merari. The Malbim says this is going in descending order of holiness. The Kohanim are certainly the most elevated and holy tribe. Their job is to serve in the actual temple and do the avodah, bring the sacrifices. They're the only ones who can do the things that they do. Next in line was the rest of the family of Kehat. Although they were not Kohanim, they had the most distinguished job amongst the Levim, which in the desert, what did they carry? Do you recall? Anybody? The ark. They carried the holy ark and the Kodesh. All the things that were most sanctified was the job of the Kehatim. And that's why they were given the section of Jerusalem. Their cities were distributed right in the temple area. Yehuda, Shimon, and Binyamin. I'll show you on a map soon. That's all around the temple area, Yerushalayim. Next in line was Gershon. Gershon, did anybody recall what they carried in the desert? What was their job? They carried the curtains of the Mishkan. The curtains. The Malbim explains that is like if the Aron, the holy ark, is the heart, the curtains are like the internal organs surrounding the heart. They're next in line. And then finally you had Merari, who carried the beams and the boards of the Mishkan, also holy, but the most external section of it, and therefore they got more in the outskirts. Their cities were more divided amongst the outskirts of the land of Israel and in the Transjordan. A very fascinating take of the Malbim, how the level of the families was reflected in the places where they got their inheritance. So let me show you now. It's important for us to see a map of that, just so we can. Here in the verses, it's just a list of cities. So it's helpful to have these maps, which again are always approximate, but they'll certainly help. And right after the map, I think we'll have to take our leave for Mark. Okay, is this, is that a blurry picture? Unfortunately, a little bit blurry. Okay, that's the best we have for now. So here we have the first three tribes were Yehuda and Shimon, we know, are together, and Binyamin. This was the section of the Kohanim. All their cities, any black dot here is a Levite city. They got 13 of them. The Kohanim got 13 cities. The rest of Kehat, I'm going to lead you straight here. The rest of Kehat, they got from Ephraim, Dan, and half of Menashe. which again, you'll see that's right above Jerusalem. So to speak, the internal organs, next in line in terms of holiness. And then after that, we have the tribe of the family of Gershon got half of Menashe, Yisachar, Asher, and Naphtali. So this is the blurry part of the map. Yisachar, Asher, and Naphtali over here. And in the Malbim's map, Zevulun and the rest are on the outer edges. Zevulun, Reuben, and Gad, these are these cities. They got the outer extremities in terms of the 42 cities. Now, it's important to know that although there were 6 cities of refuge listed in the previous chapter, any other one of the 42 cities of the Levites also can serve as a city of refuge, which makes a total of 48 cities of refuge. But there's a total of 48 cities. And the difference between the 6 and the 42 is the 6 will even protect you if you walked in there by accident, or you walked in there not intending to take refuge, it will still protect you. As opposed to the other 42, the person has to go in there with intent to be protected. It's a nuanced difference, but it's an important one. Okay, and that is the division of these parts. God willing, next time we will proceed with some goodbyes. Yeshua says goodbye to Reuben and Gad, sends them back to the other side of the Jordan, and then we will say goodbye to Yeshua as well. So I look forward to learning with you again next week. Yeah, maybe we'll have a party or something. I'll see. Look at it.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank
Very
you.
nice. Happy New Year.
Happy-